Planet Nova shone brightly in the deep black of space. Its skies were painted with streaks of blue and green gases, swirling in patterns that looked like a moving painting. Cities floated above the planet's surface, held by advanced anti-gravity technology. The largest of these floating cities, Luminaris, was hosting the Galactic Trade Summit, an event that brought together leaders, inventors, and traders from dozens of planets. Inside the grand summit hall, enormous crystal walls reflected the colors of the swirling skies outside. The floor was smooth and made of a material that seemed to glow gently beneath every step. Hundreds of delegates from various planets gathered, dressed in unique garments that reflected their homeworlds. Some shimmered with light, others seemed to shift colors as they moved. Among the humans present was Rin, a young negotiator known for her intelligence and calm nature. She had been sent to represent Earth in the interstellar trade talks. Her human colleagues looked nervous as they observed aliens from other planets, some with 6 arms, others with wings, and a few whose shapes were almost unrecognizable. Rin adjusted her jacket and checked her datapad. She knew that Earth had a chance to secure trade deals that could change the planet's economy, but she also knew it would not be easy. Many of the other delegates had already dismissed humans as inexperienced and weak. At the same time, in the quiet corridors of the summit, Tali, the young daughter of a maid working at the conference center, moved quickly between cleaning tasks. She carried a tray of refreshments, but her eyes were always watching the people around her. Tali was not a negotiator or an official. She was small, observant, and curious. She had learned to read faces and gestures better than most adults because she had spent her whole life observing the world carefully. Today, Tali's attention was caught by an unusual guest arriving at the summit. The guest, an alien named Corin, moved with a slow, deliberate grace. His skin shimmered faintly like polished metal, and his eyes reflected a calm intelligence. But there was something else about him. He carried a device at his wrist that helped him communicate in signs because Corin was deaf. Unlike the other delegates who immediately gathered attention, Corin walked quietly, and most humans and aliens ignored him. Tali noticed how the room treated Corin. People glanced briefly, then turned away. Some whispered, dismissing him. Others made gestures that were clearly meant to mock him. Tali felt a spark of curiosity. She had learned from her mother, who worked as a maid in wealthy homes, that people often missed what was right in front of them when they judged too quickly. She wondered what Corin's story might be. Meanwhile, Rin was preparing for her first meeting with interstellar trade leaders. She had studied the charts, supply lines, and production rates of multiple planets. She had rehearsed her speeches, but even she felt tension. The summit was competitive. Deals worth billions of credits were on the table, and a single mistake could make humans appear insignificant. The room shifted as delegates started to gather for the first session. Holographic displays floated above the floor, showing charts of resources, trade routes, and planetary demands. Rin took a deep breath and scanned the room. She noticed that Corin had taken a seat near the edge, quietly observing. The other humans barely glanced at him. Some were already whispering about how irrelevant a deaf alien could be in complex negotiations. Tali approached Corin carefully, carrying a tray of drinks. She smiled politely, and for a moment Corin's eyes brightened. He made a gesture with his hands, and though most people did not notice, Tali recognized it as a greeting. Tali had seen some sign language from training videos in the city, and she could understand simple gestures. She smiled back and made the same gesture, mimicking his movements. Corin's expression changed from cautious to pleasantly surprised. He gestured more, and Tali followed, matching each movement as best as she could. Around them, the room continued its business, ignoring the quiet conversation happening at the edge of the hall. Tali realized that Corin was trying to communicate something important. She leaned closer, carefully listening to his gestures, which seemed to form patterns rather than random movements. Meanwhile, Rin began the official session. The first topic was interplanetary resource sharing. Delegates spoke confidently, listing numbers, percentages, and contracts. Rin raised her hand and offered suggestions, but many leaders interrupted, dismissing her ideas. Some argued that humans had no experience managing resources across planets. Rin's cheeks flushed, but she held her calm. She could not afford to show weakness. Tali, meanwhile, had moved to a quieter corner where she could watch Corin. She noticed that his gestures seemed to describe a resource distribution plan that was unlike anything the other leaders were presenting. It was innovative, efficient, and fair. Tali's heart raced. If someone understood Corin, this could be the deal of a lifetime. But no one else seemed to notice him. During a short break, Tali approached Rin. "I can communicate with him," she said softly. Rin looked at her, confused. "Who?" she asked. Tali pointed toward Corin, the alien. "He is deaf, he is ignored, but he has ideas. I can understand him." Rin hesitated. She was used to working with professionals, not children. But something in Tali's eyes convinced her. There was a confidence and clarity that even Rin admired. "Very well," Rin said finally. "Show me what he is saying." Tali returned to Corin and began to translate. She moved her hands carefully, repeating Corin's gestures in ways humans could understand. At first, Rin could barely follow, but soon the patterns became clear. Corin's ideas were brilliant. They suggested a new way to share energy resources between planets that would save billions of credits and prevent waste. As Rin listened, she realized that Tali and Corin together had something special. The two of them, using signs and careful observation, were uncovering insights that no one else had considered. Slowly, Rin started to present the ideas to the other leaders. At first there were murmurs and skepticism, but the clarity of the plan could not be ignored. Tali watched Corin closely. He gestured to show the balance of resources and the fairness of trade. She signed the information to Rin, who repeated it aloud. The other delegates leaned forward, intrigued by this new proposal. Some whispered in surprise, realizing that humans could in fact offer valuable insight. As the first day of the summit ended, Tali felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She knew that what she and Corin had started could change how humans were seen in the galaxy. Humans were no longer just observers. They were contributors. And all because a young girl had taken the time to understand someone who others ignored. The night sky over Luminaris glowed with a soft light, and Tali looked out from the balcony of the conference center. She thought about the long journey ahead. The summit had just begun, and she could already see the challenges, rivalries, and opportunities that awaited. But she also knew one thing for certain. When humans listened, observed, and understood, there was nothing they could not achieve. Tali returned inside, ready to continue helping Rin and Corin. She felt a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was a bridge between worlds, and tomorrow, the real work of negotiation, strategy, and courage would begin. By the end of Part 1, the stage is set. The key players are introduced: Rin, Tali, and Corin. The tension between human potential and alien skepticism is established. The audience sees that communication, observation, and empathy could lead to extraordinary results, setting up the next phase of the story where the summit's challenges will test courage, intelligence, and human determination. The sun rose over planet Nova, casting golden streaks across the floating city of Luminaris. The summit hall was already buzzing with activity. Delegates from dozens of planets moved between discussions, holographic charts, and data displays. Humans like Rin were preparing for the day ahead, but Tali moved quietly through the corridors, her eyes searching for Corin. Corin had arrived early. He sat at the edge of the main chamber, his metallic skin reflecting the soft morning light. While the other delegates busied themselves with presentations and trade proposals, Corin sat silently, studying charts and observing the room. Most humans barely noticed him. Some aliens glanced at him, then turned back to their companions. Only Tali had paid attention to him from the very beginning. Tali approached him carefully, holding a small data pad with notes she had taken the day before. She smiled at Corin, who responded with a small nod. Using his hands, he began to describe a new idea, and Tali repeated each gesture silently in her mind. She noticed that Corin's plan was not just about resources. It was about fairness, efficiency, and trust. These were things the other delegates rarely considered. Meanwhile, Rin arrived carrying her notes and data pads. She glanced at the hall and frowned slightly. Many leaders were already dismissing human proposals. A few whispered to one another about how inexperienced humans were. Rin clenched her jaw but reminded herself to stay calm. Experience alone would not win this summit. Intelligence, creativity, and strategy would. During the first session, a representative from the planet Zyra spoke confidently about their trade routes. The alien's voice was clear, and their holographic charts were impressive. We propose a redistribution of energy resources that favors planets with high production, the Zira delegate announced. This will maximize efficiency across the galaxy. Rin listened carefully. She knew the plan was efficient but not fair. Several planets would lose energy and conflict could arise. She opened her mouth to respond, but several older delegates shook their heads, dismissing her suggestions. They believed a human negotiator could not possibly understand interstellar economics. Tali watched from the corner. She noticed Corin making small gestures, almost like a secret language. His hands moved in patterns that seemed to describe a better plan, one that balanced production, distribution, and fairness. Tali's eyes widened. She realized that no one else was paying attention, and Corin's ideas could change everything. During a break, Tali approached Rin with a determined look. "I can help," she said quietly. "He has ideas. Important ones. I can understand him." Rin hesitated, unsure if she could trust a child with such a critical task. But she had no other options. The other leaders ignored Corin. If they wanted a new strategy that could benefit humans and others, they needed someone to listen. "All right," Rin said finally. "Show me what he is saying." Tali returned to Corin. She stood near him and began to sign. At first it was slow. She repeated each gesture in her mind, trying to remember patterns and meanings. Corin's hands moved elegantly, forming shapes that conveyed numbers, ideas, and concepts. Tali translated silently to Rin, who listened intently. The more Tali translated, the more Rin realized the brilliance of Corin's plan. It was simple yet revolutionary. Instead of favoring high-production planets, Corin's strategy considered every planet's needs and contributions. The plan suggested energy-sharing systems, trade agreements, and backup strategies in case of emergencies. It was a plan that could save billions of credits while preventing disputes between planets. Rin took a deep breath. She had seen many trade proposals, but this one was different. It was not just about profit. It was about building trust and long-term cooperation. Rin began presenting the plan to other delegates. At first, they were skeptical. A human child translating for a deaf alien? They could not take it seriously. Tali continued to translate Corin's gestures, showing every detail of the proposal. Slowly, the other delegates leaned forward, curiosity replacing skepticism. The alien leaders began asking questions. How would the plan work in extreme conditions? What if one planet refused to participate? Tali signed Corin's answers and Rin repeated them. The clarity of communication surprised everyone. Corin's plan was practical and flexible. It addressed concerns that no other proposal had considered. Some of the skeptical leaders began nodding, realizing the value humans could bring when they listened carefully and understood the needs of others. As the day progressed, rival companies and delegations began to notice Tali and Corin. They exchanged whispers, trying to figure out what humans were doing differently. They had assumed humans would be weak, but the combination of Tali's translation and Corin's insights was proving powerful. Tali noticed one particular group of delegates from planet Virex who were trying to manipulate negotiations. They suggested fake numbers, hoping to confuse the other leaders. Tali observed their movements and realized that their plan could sabotage the entire summit. She quickly signed to Rin, who corrected the misunderstanding in the discussion. The Virex delegates were caught off guard, and their attempt to mislead others failed. By mid-afternoon, the room was buzzing with energy. Delegates who had ignored humans earlier were now listening closely. Rin presented the details with confidence while Tali and Corin worked silently as a team. Each gesture, each sign carried meaning, and the room slowly shifted from skepticism to interest. Tali felt a growing sense of pride. She was no longer just the maid's daughter. She was an essential part of something much bigger. Corin's plan was being understood, appreciated, and even celebrated by some leaders. She had bridged a gap that no one else had seen. During a short break, Rin approached Tali. "You have an incredible gift," Rin said softly. "Without you, we might have been ignored entirely." Tali blushed but shook her head. "It is not just me," she said. "He has the ideas. I just help others see them." Rin nodded, understanding that Tali's humility and empathy were as important as her intelligence. In a world where power and influence often overshadowed insight, the ability to listen and communicate was rare. As the final session of the day began, Corin's plan was discussed in detail. Tali stood beside Rin, translating each gesture with precision. Questions were asked about energy storage, transportation, and contingency plans. Tali's hands moved quickly, matching Corin's every movement. The leaders began to see the full picture. They realized that Corin's proposal could prevent disputes, improve interplanetary cooperation, and create a system that worked for all. The murmurs of doubt turned into nods of agreement. Some delegates even applauded the clarity of the human-alien collaboration. By the time the session ended, the atmosphere in the room had changed. Humans were no longer the quiet observers of the summit. They were contributors, innovators, and problem solvers. Rin smiled at Tali and Corin. Together, they had turned attention from dismissal to respect. As the delegates left the hall, Tali and Rin walked together toward the exit. Tali looked up at the floating city above, its structures glowing softly. "Do you think they will take us seriously tomorrow?" she asked. Rin smiled. "They already have. Tomorrow will be about proving that humans can lead, not just follow." That evening, Tali returned to her small quarters in the summit's service wing. She thought about everything that had happened. The excitement of understanding Corin's ideas, the tension of being ignored, and the small victories of the day filled her mind. She realized that communication, observation, and courage could open doors that no one expected. Corin, seated nearby, watched her quietly. He gestured something simple, a small bow of respect. Tali understood immediately. The trust between them had grown, not because of titles or money, but because of shared understanding. Before falling asleep, Tali promised herself that she would continue helping Rin and Corin. The summit was far from over. Challenges awaited, and rival leaders would try to undermine them. But for the first time, Tali felt a deep sense of confidence. She knew that humans, no matter their background, could achieve remarkable things when they listened carefully and acted wisely. Part 2 ended with hope and rising tension. Humans were no longer ignored, but the challenges of competition, sabotage, and high-stakes negotiation were only beginning. Tali's courage and insight had proven valuable, but the real test of human determination and skill lay ahead in the next sessions of the Galactic Trade Summit. The second day of the Galactic Trade Summit began with an unusual energy in the air. Delegates from many planets were discussing trade, resources, and future collaborations, but tensions simmered beneath the polite exchanges. Humans had caught attention, thanks to Tali and Corin, but not everyone welcomed this change. Some delegates, especially the representatives from powerful corporations and rival planets, were quietly plotting to disrupt the negotiations. Rin arrived early in the main hall carrying her datapads and notes. She noticed that a group of delegates from planet Virex was whispering and glancing toward her and Tali. Virex had a reputation for aggressive deals and manipulating negotiations. Rin frowned but reminded herself to remain focused. The summit was not won through fear. It was won through strategy, communication, and human ingenuity. Tali followed behind Rin, carrying a small notebook where she had written patterns of Corin's gestures. The young girl felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She knew the stakes were higher than yesterday. The plans Corin had shared were brilliant, but some delegates were beginning to see humans as a threat. If they tried to sabotage the process, it could undo all their progress. Corin arrived quietly, moving to his usual seat at the edge of the hall. He did not speak aloud, relying on his hands and the device on his wrist to communicate. Tali approached him and they exchanged a series of gestures. Corin's eyes were sharp and focused, signaling concern about the Virex delegates. Tali nodded, understanding that they had to be careful. The first session of the day focused on interplanetary resource management. A Virex delegate presented a complicated energy redistribution plan, filled with confusing numbers and subtle manipulations. Our proposal maximizes efficiency by prioritizing planets with the largest production capacities, the delegate said confidently. This ensures optimal profit and minimal waste. Rin studied the charts, frowning. The plan seemed sound at first glance, but she noticed irregularities. Some planets were listed with higher production than they could possibly generate. Others had numbers missing entirely. Rin suspected a deliberate attempt to confuse the other delegates. She signaled Tali to watch Corin closely and prepare to translate if necessary. Tali moved near Corin and began observing his gestures. His hands moved quickly, forming patterns that described a better, fairer solution. Corin's plan did not just maximize production, it balanced resources so that no planet was left behind. Tali memorized every gesture, knowing that precise translation was crucial. During the discussion, Virex delegates attempted subtle sabotage. They whispered false information to other delegates, hoping to sway the votes and prevent Rin and Tali from gaining support. But Tali noticed inconsistencies in their behavior. One delegate looked at charts differently than the others, and small gestures revealed their true intentions. She quickly signed to Rin, who clarified the numbers and exposed the deception without confrontation. The room grew tense as some delegates realized that Virex had tried to mislead them. Murmurs spread, and the Virex representatives shifted uncomfortably. Corin gestured more, outlining the details of his plan, and Tali translated everything to Rin. Together, they presented a clear, fair, and efficient solution. The clarity stunned many in the room. The summit's moderators asked questions about Corin's proposal. How would energy be stored for planets far from supply routes? What if a planet refused to participate? Tali signed answers with precision, translating Corin's subtle gestures into words that everyone could understand. Rin repeated the answers confidently. Some delegates were impressed while others were skeptical. A representative from planet Zyra leaned forward, asking detailed questions about transportation logistics. Rin and Tali worked quickly, guided by Corin's gestures. They explained a system of energy satellites, transport drones, and automated distribution centers that could adapt to changing demands. Even the skeptics had to admit the plan was practical and innovative. Despite the progress, tension continued to rise. Virex delegates whispered to allies plotting behind the scenes. They had not expected humans to understand Corin, nor had they anticipated Tali's skill in translating and interpreting every subtle gesture. They began to worry that if the plan gained support, they would lose influence and billions of credits. During a short break, Rin pulled Tali aside. "They are trying to sabotage us," Rin said quietly. "We need to be extra careful tomorrow. If they manipulate the numbers again, it could ruin everything." Tali nodded. "I saw their gestures. They are not honest. But we can stop them if we pay attention." Tali spent the rest of the break observing Corin closely. She noticed small variations in his gestures, subtle signals that indicated caution. Corin seemed to anticipate the Virex delegates' attempts at deception. Tali realized that Corin's intelligence was not just in his ideas, but in his ability to read people, detect dishonesty, and adjust plans accordingly. The next session focused on trade negotiations between multiple planets. The room was filled with holographic charts showing energy flows, production capacities, and market demands. Rin and Tali were ready. They presented Corin's plan again, highlighting its fairness, flexibility, and long-term benefits. Some delegates nodded in agreement, but others, led by Virex, raised objections. "Your plan favors smaller planets at the expense of efficiency," one Virex delegate said sharply. "It will slow production and reduce profits." Rin remained calm. "The plan is designed to maximize cooperation and prevent conflicts," she said firmly. "It ensures all planets contribute according to their capacity and receive energy according to their needs. This approach prevents shortages, disputes, and long-term inefficiency." Tali translated Corin's subtle gestures to answer additional questions. She carefully signed every detail, showing how energy storage, transport, and contingency systems work together. Corin's plan was not only fair but resilient. Even the most skeptical delegates could see its value. Virex delegates grew frustrated. Their attempts to manipulate the discussion were failing. They whispered angrily among themselves, but Tali and Rin remained focused. The rest of the room began to recognize the ingenuity of humans and the importance of careful communication. As the session ended, some delegates approached Rin and Tali with questions. "How did you understand Corin so well?" one asked. Rin smiled. "We listened carefully. Understanding is more important than assumptions." Tali felt a growing sense of pride. She had bridged a gap between humans and aliens that others had ignored. Her observation, patience, and empathy had turned a deaf alien's ideas into a solution that could change the galaxy. Later, in a quieter room, Corin gestured to Tali, showing a sequence that indicated upcoming challenges. Tali understood immediately. Rival delegations would try other tactics to undermine the plan. Some might use false promises. Others might attempt to block votes or create confusion. But Tali was ready. She and Rin would protect the integrity of the negotiations. That evening, as the summit hall emptied, Rin, Tali, and Corin reviewed their progress. Tali signed every detail of Corin's plan, making notes about how to respond to potential attacks on their ideas. Rin praised Tali's insight and courage. "You are more than a translator," she said. "You are a strategist. Your observations are keeping this plan alive." Corin gestured modestly, showing appreciation for Tali. He had not expected a human child to understand him so completely, to anticipate deception, and to communicate so effectively. Tali realized that their teamwork was more powerful than any individual skill. Together, they had created a force no one could ignore. As night fell over Luminaris, the city's floating structures glowed softly, reflecting the stars above. Tali looked out from her small quarters, thinking about the coming days. Challenges were rising and rival delegations would try harder. But Tali felt ready. Humans had already proven their value once and they could do it again. The second day ended with a mixture of hope and tension. Humans were no longer dismissed. Their careful observation, empathy, and courage had earned attention. Yet the shadow of competition and rivalry loomed large. The summit was far from over, and the real tests of negotiation, trust, and human determination were only beginning. Tomorrow would bring new sessions, new obstacles, and new opportunities. Tali knew that every gesture, every observation, and every careful translation could tip the balance. Humanity had entered the game in a way no one expected, and the galaxy was starting to notice. Part 3 concluded with the rising conflict fully established. Humans had proven their value, but rivals were plotting against them. Tali's courage and intelligence, combined with Corin's insight, would face even greater tests in the upcoming negotiations. The stage was set for a climactic struggle, where skill, trust, and understanding would determine the outcome. The third day of the Galactic Trade Summit arrived with a sense of urgency. The floating city of Luminaris glowed under the twin suns of planet Nova, casting long shadows across the summit hall. Delegates moved quickly, preparing for the most critical sessions yet. Rumors of rival delegations trying to manipulate outcomes had spread, and the tension in the air was palpable. Rin, Tali, and Corin arrived early. The hall was already crowded, filled with holographic charts displaying interplanetary trade flows, energy distributions, and projected profits. Delegates whispered in corners, some openly skeptical of humans, others quietly intrigued by the collaboration between Tali and Corin. Tali felt her heart beat faster. She knew today would be decisive. The previous days had shown the value of careful observation, understanding, and clear communication, but the real test had arrived. Rival delegations, especially those from planet Virex, were ready to make aggressive moves. Corin sat quietly at his usual spot, his hands moving in subtle gestures as he observed the room. He had noticed patterns in the rival delegation's behavior, small hints of deceit, subtle manipulations, and attempts to block fair negotiations. Tali stood nearby, ready to translate every gesture, every warning, and every idea. The first session began with a formal announcement from the summit moderators. Today, we will finalize discussions on the interplanetary energy distribution and trade agreements. All delegates are expected to present their final proposals and respond to questions. Rin and Tali shared a brief look. The stakes were higher than ever. The previous sessions had built interest in Corin's plan, but the rivals would not accept it without a challenge. Tali took a deep breath and focused on Corin's movements. His hands began to form sequences that indicated confidence in the solution, but caution about potential interference. As Rin began presenting the plan, Virex delegates interrupted with technical objections. "Your proposal is idealistic," one said sharply. "It does not account for sudden fluctuations in energy production. Minor planets cannot sustain such a system." Rin remained calm. "The plan is designed to adapt to production fluctuations. Backup systems and automated redistribution centers will prevent shortages. It is not just about efficiency, it is about fairness and sustainability." Tali signed Corin's gestures with precision, translating every detail of the backup systems, contingency plans, and resource allocation strategies. The other delegates listened closely. The clarity and logic of the explanations began to silence objections. Even Virex representatives had to pause and reconsider. The discussion grew intense. Delegates from multiple planets asked detailed questions, testing the limits of Corrin's plan. "What if a planet refuses to participate?" asked a representative from Zira. "How do we enforce compliance without creating conflict?" Tali signed rapidly, capturing Corrin's subtle movements. Rin translated. "Participation is voluntary, but incentives encourage cooperation. Planets that contribute fairly receive priority in energy distribution, technical support, and trade benefits. Trust and mutual benefit are stronger than enforcement." The room was silent for a moment, impressed by the solution. Many delegates nodded, recognizing the practicality and ingenuity of Corrin's plan. Virex delegates exchanged nervous glances, realizing their attempts to manipulate the summit had failed. But the challenge was not over. Virex representatives launched a coordinated attempt to confuse the discussion. They presented conflicting charts, contradictory numbers, and complex terminology designed to overwhelm human negotiators. The other delegates grew anxious, some struggling to follow the technicalities. Tali noticed the signs of manipulation immediately. Her eyes scanned the charts while her hands translated Corrin's gestures. Corrin in turn signaled precise corrections. Tali repeated the gestures to Rin, who addressed the inconsistencies calmly and logically. Step by step, they clarified every misleading point, restoring confidence in the plan. The atmosphere in the hall shifted. Delegates who had been hesitant before now recognized the depth and reliability of Corrin's solution. The collaborative effort of a deaf alien, a human child, and a negotiator was proving impossible to ignore. Even the moderators leaned forward, observing closely. As the session continued, Virex tried one last tactic. They proposed an alternative plan, claiming it was faster and more profitable. "This plan ensures maximum production and immediate returns," a Virex representative said. "It is simpler than the proposed system." Rin glanced at Tali. The rival plan was clever but short-sighted. It ignored smaller planets, long-term sustainability, and the need for trust. Tali signed Corrin's gestures carefully, showing the flaws in the alternative plan. Rin presented the counter-arguments clearly, highlighting the risks of the Virex proposal and emphasizing the strength of Corrin's strategy. Some delegates began to murmur in agreement. They saw that the alternative plan, though attractive, would create conflict and imbalance. Corrin's plan, on the other hand, offered a balanced, fair, and adaptable solution. Slowly, the room began to support the human-alien collaboration. The tension reached its peak when a powerful delegate from the planet Orvian challenged the human-alien team directly. "Are you confident that your solution can handle all unforeseen circumstances? A billion-credit investment requires certainty." Tali's hands moved quickly, capturing Corrin's detailed gestures. Rin translated. "The plan includes adaptive systems, automated monitoring, and multiple safeguards. While no system is entirely predictable, this plan minimizes risk, maximizes cooperation, and benefits every participating planet. It is the most reliable solution for long-term success." The Orvian delegate studied the explanation, then nodded slowly. "This is impressive," they admitted. "It addresses efficiency, fairness, and security. We are convinced." One by one, other delegates expressed agreement. The human-alien plan was gaining overwhelming support. Even some who had doubted the approach admitted its value. Virex representatives looked frustrated and defeated. Their attempts to control the summit had failed, and the collective realization of the plan's superiority was undeniable. Finally, the moderators opened the floor for a vote on the plan. Delegates signaled their approval through holographic interfaces, and the results were clear. Corrin's strategy, translated and presented by Tali and Rin, had won unanimous support. The billion-credit deal was approved, marking an extraordinary achievement. Tali felt her heart swell with pride. She had observed, learned, and acted. She had bridged the gap between worlds, translating the ideas of a deaf alien into a solution that no one else had understood. Corrin's hands moved in a gesture of gratitude and respect, acknowledging Tali's role in making the impossible possible. Rin approached Tali and smiled. "You did it," she said. "We did it together. This is more than a deal. It is proof that humans can make a difference in the galaxy." Delegates began to congratulate Rin and Tali. Corrin signed quickly, expressing appreciation for the human child who had listened, understood, and communicated so effectively. The room was filled with admiration, and even the rival delegates could not hide their respect. As the celebration quieted, Tali reflected on the journey. The summit had begun with doubt, skepticism, and dismissal of both humans and Corin. But through careful observation, communication, and courage, they had achieved what many thought impossible. The deal was more than 1 billion credits. It was a symbol of trust, understanding, and the power of cooperation. That evening, Luminaris glowed softly under the twin suns, its floating structures reflecting the stars above. Tali, Rin, and Corin gathered in a quiet room to review the summit's success. Tali signed every detail of the final plan, noting the strategies, contingencies, and approvals. Corin's gestures were calm and proud, acknowledging the teamwork that had made the achievement possible. Rin turned to Tali. "You have a gift," she said. "Not just in understanding Corin, but in seeing what others ignore. Your courage and insight have changed the way humans are seen in the galaxy." Tali smiled, feeling a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. "It was not just me," she said. "We did this together. Listening, understanding, and trusting each other made it possible." Corin gestured once more, a sequence that Tali recognized as a final sign of respect and gratitude. The bond between them had grown stronger through challenge, collaboration, and shared effort. As night settled over Luminaris, the city's lights reflected on the calm waters below. The summit had reached its climax, and humans had proven their worth. But Tali knew that the story was not over. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be new challenges, new negotiations, and new opportunities to demonstrate courage and understanding. For now, though, they had achieved something remarkable. The 1 billion credit deal had been finalized, rivals had been outsmarted, and humanity had earned respect. Tali, the maid's daughter, had shown that insight, empathy, and determination could bridge worlds. Tomorrow, they would celebrate the success, but tonight, Tali allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had observed what others ignored, acted where others hesitated, and communicated in ways that changed the course of events. Humanity had taken a step forward, and she had been at the heart of it. Part 4 ended with the climax of the summit. Humans and Corin had faced intense. The morning after the Galactic Trade Summit's climactic sessions was calm, yet filled with anticipation. The floating city of Luminaris shimmered in the early light, and the twin suns of planet Nova cast golden reflections across the summit hall. Delegates from dozens of planets moved quietly through the corridors, discussing the finalized deals and their implications. Rin, Tali, and Corin arrived early, aware that today would focus on recognition, implementation, and the celebration of achievement. While the 1 billion credit deal had been approved, its impact had yet to be fully realized. Humans had proven their ability to contribute, but now they needed to cement trust and show that their involvement could bring real results. Tali felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. The summit had been a challenge unlike anything she had experienced before, and now came the moment where the outcomes would ripple through the galaxy. She walked beside Rin, carrying her notebook where she had recorded every detail of Corin's gestures, plans, and contingencies. Corin moved with quiet confidence, his hands gesturing fluidly as he observed the other delegates. He had noticed that the previous days had built respect for humans, but some delegates still held doubts about their reliability in long-term interstellar projects. Today, Corin and Tali would help erase any remaining hesitation. The first session of the morning focused on implementation strategies. Delegates discussed the deployment of energy satellites, transport drones, and automated distribution centers across multiple planets. Rin explained each step clearly, while Tali translated every gesture from Corin. The delegates followed closely, impressed by the precision and detail of the plan. "What makes this plan truly effective is adaptability," Rin explained. "Systems can adjust in real time to changes in production or demand. Energy flow is monitored continuously, ensuring stability for every planet involved." Tali signed Corin's gestures carefully, showing how algorithms in the automated systems could respond to emergencies. Corin's plan included safety protocols, contingency routes, and cooperation agreements that ensured no planet would be left behind. As Rin relayed the translation, delegates nodded in approval. The mood in the room was noticeably lighter than the previous days. Delegates who had been skeptical now asked questions to clarify details, not to challenge the humans or Corin. One of the representatives from Zira said, "We underestimated the value of collaboration." This plan is thorough and fair. It reflects careful thought and understanding of diverse planetary needs. Tali smiled subtly. The words reinforced what she already knew. Attention, empathy, and clarity could change perceptions, even in the galaxy's most competitive environments. During a break, Rin approached Tali. "You've done more than anyone could have expected," she said softly. "You understood Corrin, anticipated challenges, and helped guide negotiations to success." Tali shook her head gently. "It was not just me. It was us together. Understanding Corrin, working with you, and observing carefully made it possible. We listened when others ignored." The final session focused on formal recognition and announcements. The moderators invited delegates to share their feedback and gratitude. One by one, representatives praised the clarity, fairness, and efficiency of Corrin's plan. When it was Rin's turn to speak, she acknowledged Tali's role explicitly. "This young human," Rin said, smiling warmly at Tali, "observed what others ignored. She translated, clarified, and communicated ideas that changed the course of negotiations. Her insight and courage remind us that greatness can come from anyone, anywhere." The room erupted in polite applause, and some delegates stood to show admiration. Tali felt her cheeks flush, but she knew the recognition was not about personal praise. It was about the proof that humans could contribute in meaningful ways, regardless of background or status. Corrin gestured to Tali, a sequence that expressed gratitude, respect, and shared accomplishment. Tali returned the gesture, understanding the silent bond they had created through days of collaboration, observation, and communication. Virex delegates, who had tried to manipulate the summit, approached cautiously. One of them spoke quietly. "We underestimated your skill. You have shown that understanding, honesty, and careful communication can overcome even calculated interference. Humans have value we did not see before." Tali nodded politely. "We all have value when we listen and act wisely." As the day progressed, delegates moved from discussion to celebration. The billion-credit interstellar deal was officially recorded, and plans for implementation were set in motion. Humans were now officially recognized as equal partners in interplanetary cooperation. Rin, Tali, and Corrin were invited to a private meeting with several high-ranking delegates who wished to discuss long-term collaboration. These discussions focused on advanced technology sharing, joint energy production, and future trade agreements. Rin took the lead, but Tali's translation and understanding of Corrin remained crucial. Every subtle gesture and insight mattered. After the meeting, Tali stepped onto a balcony overlooking the floating city. The suns reflected off the luminous surfaces, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. She thought about her journey, from observing Corrin quietly, translating his gestures and navigating the summit's challenges, to now standing as a recognized contributor to interstellar trade. Corrin joined her silently, his hands moving in a gesture that conveyed respect and partnership. Tali smiled. "We made a difference," she signed, and Corrin responded with a gesture that acknowledged their shared achievement. Rin approached and stood beside them. "This summit has changed the way humans are seen in the galaxy," she said. "Your courage, Tali, and your insight, Corrin, have shown that cooperation and understanding can overcome prejudice and skepticism. Together you have opened doors that were once closed." Tali nodded. She realized that humanity's true strength was not in technology, money, or power alone, but in empathy, observation, and determination. The ability to listen, understand, and act wisely could transform even the most challenging situations. Delegates began to leave the summit, sharing stories of collaboration and innovation. Many expressed excitement about future projects with humans, eager to continue partnerships based on trust and respect. Tali felt proud knowing she had played a central role in this transformation. Later, a formal ceremony recognized the leaders of the successful negotiations. Rin received a commendation for leadership, Corrin for insight and innovation, and Tali for extraordinary observation, communication, and courage. When Tali accepted her recognition, she emphasized that the success was collective. "Understanding, listening, and working together made this possible," she said. "We all contributed, and together we can achieve great things." The ceremony concluded with applause from delegates across dozens of planets. Humans, once overlooked and underestimated, had earned respect and admiration. The billion credit deal was more than a financial achievement. It was proof of humanity's ingenuity, empathy, and perseverance. That evening, Luminaris glowed under the starlit sky. Tali, Rin, and Corin gathered in a quiet room to review the final details of the implementation plan. Tali signed Corin's gestures, ensuring that every nuance was recorded. Rin smiled, observing the seamless collaboration between a human child and a deaf alien negotiator. Corin gestured a sequence indicating satisfaction and approval. Tali responded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Together they had shown that communication, understanding, and courage could overcome prejudice, skepticism, and even deliberate interference. As Tali prepared for the journey back to Earth, she reflected on her growth. She had started as the Maid's daughter, quietly observing from the corners of the summit. Through courage, careful observation, and empathy, she had become a vital bridge between worlds. Humanity had proven its worth not through force or wealth, but through insight, cooperation, and determination. Rin and Corin accompanied Tali to the docking platform, where sleek interstellar ships waited. Delegates waved goodbye, and Tali felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. The galaxy had recognized humans, but the work of collaboration and innovation was just beginning. Before boarding the ship, Rin placed a hand on Tali's shoulder. "Never forget what you have accomplished," she said. "You have shown the galaxy that humans, no matter their background, can achieve greatness when they listen, understand, and act with courage." Tali nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had learned that every gesture mattered, every observation counted, and that true strength came from seeing what others ignored and acting wisely. Corin's final gesture was simple but meaningful, a bow of respect and acknowledgement. Tali returned it, knowing that the bond they had formed would remain strong even across the vast distances of space. The interstellar ship lifted off, carrying Tali, Rin, and Corin toward new adventures. The summit was over, but its lessons would echo throughout the galaxy. Humans had proven their value, and Tali had proven that courage, insight, and empathy could transform not only a single negotiation, but the perception of an entire species. As Planet Nova receded beneath them, Tali looked out at the stars. The journey had begun in observation and understanding, had faced conflict and deception, and had ended in triumph. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, and a young girl's courage had changed the course of the galaxy.